Are you stuck for painting ideas? Don't want any long-winded paint guides but still want your models to look great on the battlefield? Well, this video might just be what you're looking for, especially if you're going to delve into the Trench Crusade universe. I'm Peachy, and this is Peachy Tips. Now recently, as in probably the very last video I did a little video on kit bashing some Trench Crusade stuff, and I had a lot of fun doing it, and I thought, you know what, I had so much fun doing it, I'm going to paint up the things from that kit bashing video. So there's three factions I concentrated on, and that was the Fortress of Britannia, the Heretic Legion, and the Iron Sultanate. Now what I will say is these aren't official colour schemes, these are more drawing from inspirations from historical references as well as the awesome art found in the Trench Crusade rules. So with that little bit of waffle aside, let's look at our first scheme, which is going to be the Fortress of Britannia. Now my inspirations for the Fortress of Britannia are kind of drawn from history, so World War I, World War II, so using the colours from that period, so like the khaki outfits, the battle dress that they would wear, the Brody helmets, but I also wanted to give it a bit more of a feudal feel as well, so that's why I put like the three lion shield design on their arms. Now though I have only covered painting the Yeoman trooper, so the standard looking British trooper I've done for this faction, I have also done some Royal Marines and a Scot as well. Now I know the Scots have their own faction, but I kind of like the idea of maybe like a rogue clan or like some mercenary clan working with the British or the English in this. Because traditionally the Scots tend to have a nice representation in the armed forces of the United Kingdom, so it kind of felt right for me. I wanted to do that, and that's why I've done it. If you do want to copy these schemes, all I've really done is just swapped out like the red tunic for like a green for the Royal Marines. I know they've got green fatigues, but you can do what you want with that. Also for the Scot, I've used like a blue as well. So all you really need to do is just change the tunic colour if you wanted to, or do something entirely different. There's no right or wrong way. Right, let's crack on looking at how to paint a yeoman of the Fortress of Britannia. So for my Fortress of Britannia colour scheme, I'm starting with a colour called Trench Brown as my undercoat. Then I'm going to get myself some Beret Maroon because I really like this red. So all I'm going to do is thin it down. So a couple of paintbrushes of water, just apply that onto the palette, load up my brush, and then start painting it onto the big hauberk, tunic, leather jerkin, whatever you want to call it. That's what I'm painting. Because it's thinned as well, as it dries, it will show some of that brown through. So it looks a bit worn and a bit tatty and old, which is kind of what I want because, well, they've been fighting in the trenches and fighting against legions of horror for many, many years. And it also makes the red look a bit faded, so it's not too bright. Yeah, just work your way around, take your time. And if you're making mistakes, don't worry, we can tie that up in a bit with some Steel Legion drab, which is what I'm doing right now. So any mistakes, you can do this at the very end, it's totally up to you. I sometimes do it as I go along as well. So if I get some red on some sleeves and stuff like that, I just get around to tidy up. Then I get some black. Now you can do two things, because I'm using matte black a lot in this video. I could use grim black, which is a speed paint, and just because it's already thinned down. But with matte black, I have two options. I can just use it neat straight from the pot, but I can also thin it down a little bit, which is kind of what I've done here. I've thinned it down a little bit, paintbrush of paint, paintbrush of water, and it will show some of that brown through as well. And again, it looks like old leather, just a bit tatty and a bit worn. But in some places, I want it a bit more neater as well. But yeah, work your way around on gloves, boots, gas mask. I'm also going to paint the gun because it's going to be all black in the cracks. And then when I come to painting some silver, I don't have to worry about getting all the nooks and crannies because, well, I'll be black in there. It's fine. Then I'll get some gun metal. This is just for any silver details. So things like buckles, like edges of belts and stuff like that. Parts of the gas mask, like the ringlets around the eyes. Obviously the little filters on the side and at the front. Don't know what the bits on the side are. Any kind of details on the sword as well. Again, just make your way around. Find any silver bits you want to pick out and pick them out. Of course, can't forget his T-mug. Also, the little buckles on these straps, I'll just paint the whole thing silver, and then later on I can just add a little bit of red in the middle. It's a bit easier that way. I did forget the sword hilt, so I'm just picking that out with black now. And then just dropping in that red in the centre of those little buckles. Quick and easy. Do it with the brown one as well if you need to. Now in the John Blanche set, they do have a really dark gunmetal colour, but I'm going to make my own. So I'm just using some matte black and gunmetal, which are both paints I've already used. Mix them together, and I'm going to paint that over my Bren gun. And again, if you do any other guns, you can use the same. You can mix a bit more black in there if you need to make it a little bit darker. Whatever works for you. The little bedroll underneath his satchel, I'm just going to pick that out in dark olive as well. Again, I'll be using this colour later on for other things. Now for freehanding and insignia and stuff like that, I normally do this at the very end of the paint job. But at this point, it's actually a lot easier to do these designs because it's in the base coat stage. So what I can do is I can make my little shield design, which is what I'm going to do here. I'm going to do a little England symbol with the 3 lines. So I'll do that on one side, and then any mistakes I make, I can correct now before I wash over or do any other details and stuff. It's just a lot easier at this point because all the base coats are there, and it saves you having to like try and mix the colour to make it match. So I'm doing a shield on his helmet, doing a little patch on his arm. This would just be like a little regimental marking. It could be whatever you want it to be, really. You could do like a desert rat symbol, you could do whatever. But with this particular one, I'm just going to put like a nice red X or cross through it. Now, when I did do it, obviously as is the way, sometimes some lines are a little bit thicker than others. So I can either just thicken up the line or start from the beginning again or whatever. Now, I did make him a little bit prouder of the actual design. That's fine because I am now going to tidy back up with a little bit of that Steel Legion drab, which is a colour match to the undercoat spray. So if I do make a few wibbly wobbly areas, I can just easily correct them with this base paint. Nice and easy. Obviously be mindful not to completely remove the design. I've done that before. And doing this tidy up stage just means that you don't have to be too stressed about being super neat. You can always tidy back up later if you make any mistakes. Just going to pick out his eyes in red. And then just tidy back up with silver because I've got a little bit of red on it. That's fine. It does happen. And then here, I'm just going to do like 3 little diagonal sort of lines to represent like the 3 lines. It's just because it's quite small. It gives the impression it's artistic license. Might just do some dots to make it look like lions' heads. And on the one on the helmet, I'm just doing literally 3 little lines. Again, from a distance, it might look like the 3-line design. And then I'm going to coat the whole lot in a wash. Whatever wash you want to use, entirely up to you. Once I've applied it quite thickly to start off with, I then get a little bit of water on my brush and then just move that around. Certainly around like things like my little badges I've just made, so they're not too dark. But you twit your way around, have some fun. And there we are, models ready for the tabletop. At this point, you can just leave it as it is, but if you want to take it to the next level, then we can add some highlights. And one quick, easy highlight is to do a dry brush all over. This is going to highlight the sleeves, the fatigues, the helmet, but also make that tunic a little bit more weathered as well. You don't have to do this way. I like to do a dry brush, gives it a nice rough look. But what you can do is use that same colour and just edge highlight instead, certainly on the sleeves, or you can do both as a combination, like I'm kind of doing with this guy. But it really does make a nice effect with doing some edge highlights using a brush on the cloth, but a nice dry brush on that big leather jerkin tunic. You can twit your way around, picking out buttons, any folds of cloth, any mistakes you might have made as well. For the sword scabbard, I'm just doing the little bits of wrapping around it as opposed to the actual scabbard itself. Just makes it look a little bit different. And then any kind of like details on the bags, satchels, packs, whatever, just make them stand out. You can base coat some if you really wanted to make them look a little bit different. Pick out the rim of the helmet, and then I've just thin a little bit down on the top of the helmet just to make it a little bit more like blotched and blemished. And if you need to, tidy up any of those yellow markings. Now, in the later stages of painting, one thing I do like to do is get some black or some dark brown and thin it down, and then just help define some of the edges that may have been lost, or like the wash hasn't quite done what I wanted it to do. It's a really good way of dividing areas as well, because sometimes they can just merge into one if you're not careful. So between like hands and sleeves, or between belts and tunics or something like that. And I want this Brody helmet to have a little bit of a shine to it because it is a big metal helmet. So I'm just going to get some military shade, which does have a bit of a satin finish when it dries, and then just dab off the top so it looks a bit battered and dirty. But that'll give it a little bit of a sheen. And then we're going to base. So this is the same basing technique I'm going to use for all the models in the guide. So initially I add some wet ground to the base, then I add a little bit of water, move it around so it's just a bit easy to move between the feet and stuff. And with this particular effect, so it looks a bit trenchy, I'm just going to stab some of that watered down wet ground around the boots. So it looks a bit muddy and dirty because obviously been trudging through all the mud. And then once I've done that, I can then add a bit more thicker wet ground to the actual base as well. And then finish off once it's dry with some grass tufts, because I thought they always look quite good. Just a little bit of tuff sticking through the mud. But to make them look even more grimy and dirty and dead, what I do like to do is thin down some of that wet ground and then apply it over the tufts. Toughens them up and also makes them look a bit dirty. There we are, the Yeoman of the Fortress of Britannia is done. I can't express how much I enjoyed painting this guy. Not just this guy, but the other guys as well. I added more because I got excited. I've even done like a big mechanized infantry suit. I did a video a while back on kit bashing a bunch of new Antioch stuff. And I've basically used a Stormcast Eternal as a base for this and just added a Brody helmet and stuck some random guns on it. This one's a little bit different than the one I did in the video, but if you want to know how I did the one in the video, check out the video up here, and that will show you kind of the rough idea of what I went about doing. So if you do want to use Stormcast as your basis for mechanized infantry, then that video will be quite useful for that as well. This is 3 Trench Crusade videos. Sweet, I like it. Yes, well, that was the Fortress of Britannia. So let's move on to the Heretic Legion. Now, the Heretic Legion, I used in the kit bashes a lot of Deathcore Krieg and Traitor Guard stuff from Games Workshop. I just had them around. I just felt they looked a bit heretical, really, and it kind of worked. I know traditionally, certainly in the art and the background, the Heretic Legion have more of like a World War I, World War II vibe for like, well, I guess German-esque kind of stuff, but other things as well. So they do look a bit more militarized, whereas mine look, I guess, look a little bit more Games Workshop-y. But I don't mind about that because it kind of fits with what I wanted for my Heretic Legion. And red and black, that's the main scheme I've got here going. Red and black, I feel, just works for baddies. It just looks intimidating, and actually, at the end of the day, once I've painted these, I could probably use them as traitors in my other games if I really wanted to, or Stargrave or whatever. I want some baddies for Stargrave to fight against my goodies. Doesn't really matter, but they fit really nicely for Heretic Legion. There was one point where I kind of felt like I was painting a Mordor orc who had joined the Forces of Chaos and was kind of on secondment to the Trench Crusade universe. It was a surreal moment as I was painting this guy with the axe. But yeah, let's crack on painting a Heretic Legion or Heretic Trooper. For our Heretic Legion, I'm going to start with a nice dark red undercoat. I couldn't actually say the name properly, so I chickened out. What I'm going to then do is get some Beret Maroon, and I'm going to start dry brushing that over the whole model. Because at this point, sometimes when you are doing like colour schemes and stuff, you're not entirely sure what's going to be red, what's going to be other colours. So I just do the whole thing, and then I can pick and choose as I'm painting later on. And then I'm going to move on to some lighter red, just mostly for the tunic and his trousers, potentially, with some pure red. And that just adds a bit more punch to that red. And then very much like the Fortress of Britannia guy, I'm just going to get some black or matte black and thin it down. Again, you could use grim black, whatever you have at hand. Because I'm using matte black in this a lot, it just makes sense to thin that down. I apply thin coats as well because it's not too thick and goopy. And also, certainly evil stuff like this, if I thin it down a bit more, it's black, but it has a bit of a redness to it. And I quite like that. So instead of just being like jet black, it could be like a really, really dark, dried blood red, something like that. So it looks quite nice, certainly for like leathers and boots and stuff. So really what I'm doing here is just working my way around, picking out things that I think I want to be black or silver. So things like the shoulder armor and stuff like the chainmail, I'll do them now and then I can just apply some silver after because it's just a little bit less work. I don't have to do several coats of silver. I know the face mask I might keep red, so I'm just going to do the helmet black and then paint that silver later on. Do the whole shield black. Again, it will dry like a really, really dark red as well, which will look quite nice. Again, just, yeah, make your way around, have some fun. Then I'm going to move on to picking out some dark silver areas. So that mix I made in the first paint guide, which was just like 50-50 gunmetal and matte black. I'm just now going to apply that to any silver details. So that's going to be on things like the helmets, the shoulders, the chainmail, any other like metal details on the model. Oh, the boss on the shield, obviously. You can take your time. In some places you might want to do a second coat, but for the most part, one coat's going to be more than enough. Then those van braces look pretty cool. And then just pick out a couple of little details like maybe like buckles here and there. So stuff like on the satchel, on his shoulder straps. And like the previous guy, just drop a little bit of red in the center. Just a really quick and easy way of getting those belt buckles with the straps done. And then pick out any flesh. Now, there's not going to be much on this guy because his face is kind of obscured by that cloth. So I'm just going to pick out the hands. Originally, I was going to do him as like black leather, but I decided actually I'll have a little bit more flesh on this guy. Mostly just those elbows sticking out and some hands, really. Not a lot. I didn't even need to do 2 coats on this. Paratrooper tan doing all the heavy lifting. Then I'm going to get some wash and apply all over, very much like I did with the last one. Apply it quite heavily to start off with. Then in some places I can just add a little bit of water or just move the wash around. That's one of the biggest tips actually, is once it's all applied, just get a brush, dry it off a little bit and just soak off any excess if you need to, especially if it starts to pool. And there we are, ready for the tabletop. Or we can add some extra details. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to get some mid-battle dress and I'm going to dry brush all over the red details and also the black details as well. So that's going to give me a bit of a highlight on things like the satchel, the pouches, the boots, straps, whatever. And also look a bit weathered as well, sitting on that jerkin, very much like we did with the Fortress of Britannia guy. Just adds a little bit of extra weatheriness to it. It looks quite nice. Bit more heavy concentration around the bottom of the feet as well, so it looks a bit muddy. And after a dry brush, sometimes you do need to do a little bit tidy up. You don't have to, you can leave it weathered, but some of the straps I don't want them to look too dirty and grimy, so I'll just go back over a little bit of black here and there. Also, in that quilting of the leather jerkin, dropping a little bit of black. Some places get a bit more of a coat than others. Again, very much like I said in the previous one, where I just use the black to help define some edges or bridge the gap. And then if I need to, because shades inevitably, especially if the matte, will dull down your metals, so I'm just going to go over in some places and add a little bit more punch. And then just use a little bit of pure gunmetal here just to pick out some edges on some silver, especially the axe. And like the odd edge here on the helmet and stuff. Spikes, belt buckles, whatever really. Just make it a little bit more chipped or battered. Can't forget the rivets on the bottom of his shield either. And then just tidy up. Most of this isn't really highlighting. It is just tidying up with the previous colours. So I'm just tying it with the flesh. I've tied it with a little bit of black, a little bit of silver. Again, it's nothing particularly taxing, just tidying up, really. Now, to add a bit of interest to that shield, I'm going to do the Heretic Legion design. So it's kind of like a evil star. So first of all, I'm going to start with a V. So I'm just going to do a rudimentary V to start off with, sticking it up, and then turn it into the kind of star design that they have. So it looks a bit more like a face and horns, like a demon symbol, I guess. Kind of an upside down Star Trek symbol with some bits coming out the side of it, or a triangle doing a handstand, whichever you prefer. But yeah, just using some reference when you are doing the designs. Also on the edges of the star points there, they had like a bit of a curve like demon horns, so I made sure I did that. And this bit in the center, it's kind of like a triangle with flames coming from it, so I'm just gonna do the best I can with that. Just do some little wiggles for the actual design of the flames, and then just broaden out a little bit, and then fill in any gaps if I need to. And the great thing is, although that shield is kind of like a reddy kind of brown kind of color, I can just get some black and tidy up if I make any mistakes, because, well, I kind of use black over red anyway. So it'll just look a bit darker in some places, but it'll work. But yeah, just keep doing that flame design and then tidy up if you need to. Again, when this black dries, because it's a bit thinned down, it will just look like the shield underneath. It'll be fine. I'm not too stressed by it. But yeah, just go around any kind of little edges you're not happy with, or you just want some more definition. Maybe add some scratches in there as well. And that is our Heretic Legion design. Pretty chuffed with that. I would say his design's going is a little bit intricate in places, but if you just break into shapes like triangles and whatever, you'll be fine. There we are, our Heretic Trooper is done. Now, on his own, he looks pretty menacing, but with his buds, he looks doubly more menacing, especially with that shield. And that's what I like about Trench Crusade. It's throwing in those melee weapons and giving them more of a feudal, sort of medieval look as well. That's a really nice vibe. And honestly, with the Heretic Legion, you can do what you want. I mean, this is just my interpretation of using some spare bits I've got. It's entirely up to you how you go about doing it, and the models that they make are amazing. I probably should print some out actually and start painting some up. I just like kit bashing, what can I say? Speaking of kit bashing, Iron Sultanate. So Iron Sultanate is next. After my last video where I did the kit bashing, I've had a little bit of a think, and I think if I was to do these guys again, and I probably will do for sure, and probably even do a video about it, I'm going to use some different kits. I used the Five Forge Northman Warriors. Again, watch the video if you want to check out how I did it. But a bunch of people reached out with other kits that they'd recommend and stuff I didn't even realise that existed. I mean, I looked at Five Forge, didn't even know they did like a bunch of Persian and Berber infantry and stuff. So there's a lot of things that I can actually use that feel a bit more fitting for the Iron Sultanate. But I really like the kit Basher did here. It's just a Northman body from Five Forge games with a Victrix helmet and some War Games Atlantic Conquistador arms. And I like the look of it, but I'm going to use this as my test model. This is going to be a test for a future scheme for the Iron Sultanate. Speaking of scheme, the scheme I've drawn my inspiration from is this beautiful piece of art. I really like it, and I'm going to try and stick as close to this as I can. I'm going to put some reds in there, and I keep to the creams or the beiges or the off-whites or whatever, and then have that dark brown kind of colour for all the leather work as well. Obviously, gold is going to be key, I think, in punching out some extra embellishments here and there. But yeah, really nice piece of art. Also, one thing I do later on is add some insignia, and I wanted to draw on the Ottoman Empire kind of flags and designs and stuff, which is the sickle, moon and the star. I really like the look of that. I kind of kept it to the late 19th century sort of World War I kind of design. But what you could do with all this information here is like make different regiments or war bands, or use it for different iconography for different branches of the military or whatever. So there's a lot of cool designs in this one spread of like flags of the Ottoman Empire. So yeah, I'll definitely make use of these for different unit types, I guess. But yeah, right, let's paint an Azeb. For our Azeb, I'm going to start with a off-white or white undercoat, whatever you have at hand. So that's the initial step. And then I'm going to get some of that beret maroon again. The beret maroon's doing some heavy lifting in this paint guide today. So that's going to be for like trousers and other like little like flashes of colour here and there. Now, because it's going over white, I might have to do a couple of coats because I always like to thin it down to start off with. And you can see it looks a bit pinky in place, but that's fine. A couple of coats will get rid of that. You won't probably notice it once you've shaded it anyway. So just work your way around on the trousers. Like I say, do a couple of coats once it's dry. And then around the back of his neck, where I filled in the kit bash video with a little bit of blue tack or green stuff, whichever you want to use, it's going to paint that red. So it's like a head wrap, head scarf, maybe a coif of some kind of cloth. And I'm going to pick out a scabbard in red because I felt like that's a nice extra punch of colour on the model, because I do want that tunic to be white. I'm, again, using the art as reference as much as I can. Things like the boots, leathers and straps, I'm going to do them all dark olive. Again, looking at that piece of art as reference, it just looks really nice against the white and red. So initially I would do things like black or really dark brown, but I really like this dark olive. It's got a nice sort of leathery look to it. And in most places, I only need to do one coat. Even though I've thinned it down a little bit, it just does the job really, really nicely. So I'm just going all my way around, picking out pouches, rucksacks, ammo bags, of course, belts, straps, all that kind of stuff. And again, if I make mistakes, I can tidy back up with a little bit of white. For this guy, it's because it's a slight off-white undercoat, I will be using Brigade Grey as my tidy-up colour. But yeah, just still finishing off, moving around, picking out any brown. Oh yeah, his gloves as well. Can't forget his gloves. Then for the gun, I'm going to use Rifle Brown. Kind of makes sense because it's kind of like a rifle Jezzail thing. This is a Conquistador set of arms from War Games Atlantic, if you've not seen the kit bash video. And even though I've got a white undercoat, again, this gold's pretty good, so it's just going to go straight over that with one coat for most. It depends how much you thin it down. Again, don't forget to do like things like little buttons, buckles. Because of the Iron Sultanate, I reckon they'll be a bit more ostentatious and decorative, so adding a little bit more gold here and there will look quite nice. On the art, they have like some nice panels, but obviously I've kit bashed this from my own random bits. But yeah, a bit more gold on the model I think will look quite nice. Now on the other guides, I did do the straps the same colour as the jerkin. This one I've just done in brown, done like gold buckles, and now I'm just dropping a little bit brown in the centre for the strap. Pick out any metals. So for the gun, I'm just going to use some gun metal, actual gun metal as it is, not mixing my own, just nice and silver. Just a nice silver colour just being applied. And then I'm going to drop in some dark olive into the eyes as well. I know I use that for the straps, but after I painted the helmet gold, I thought that would look quite nice. Then I'm just going to go around and make any tidy-ups I need to. So if I've got like some red on some of the white areas, because I'll be doing some washing soon. So I'll just go around, tidy up any areas. That little bit of fuse, I'm just going to pick out in a little bit of white here and there. And then I'm going to get some wash, same wash I've used on the other guides. Again, quite heavy to start off with, but what I like to do is then add some water to my brush and then move the wash around and it just be a little bit lighter. Again, you can make it lighter by adding more water, but you don't want it too thin because then you won't get much definition. So I'm just work my way around, add a little bit more where I want it darker, so like satchels, pouches, and whatnot. And there we are. That model is ready for the tabletop, or we can add some extra colours, which is what I'm going to do now. So I'm going to tidy up. This is mostly tied up to start off with. So I'm going to get some maroon beret and then just tidy up the raised areas on all the cloth or any details that are painted red and move on the scabbard, pick out those as well. And then what I'm going to do is get some pure red, very similar to how we did the red on the Heretic Legion Trooper. Pick out any raised areas on the folds of the cloth. So around these joints, that kind of stuff. It just adds a little bit more punch to the red. I mean, you could just leave it with a tidy up, but I like to add a little bit more punch. And on the scabbard, I'm just going to do a couple of little scratches as well, just make it a little bit worn and tatty. It's probably used it for a while. And of course, that headscarf thing at the back of the helmet. Add some highlights to the folds there as well. And then what I'm going to do is get some Brigade Grey and then just edge highlight the odd little fold of cloth here and there. And I do like some jaggedy highlights around that tunic, so it looks a bit more tatty and battered. And then just, yeah, find any areas you feel like could do a little bit more punch. The panels as well, the quilting, what you want to call it, I can fill those in with a bit of a base coat in places, so it just looks a bit more of a solid colour. Now for that gold, I feel it needs to be a bit more tarnished, so I'm just going to mix some metal, gun metal, and some like greedy gold together, 50-50. Don't normally like to do mixing, but in some places, certainly if I'm doing like a war band of like 8 or so figures, I don't mind it so much because I'm not doing like a whole army. But I'm just knocking the gold back a little bit, and makes it look a bit more old and tarnished. Now for the unit markings and designs, I wanted some Ottoman Empire designs, so I was swatting up on some imagery, but I thought I'd go with something a bit more in keeping with the period, so around about like World War I, sort of like that kind of era. So this is like a nice red circular design to start off with, so I'm just going to go around on the pouch because sometimes it looks quite nice and a bit of extra colour. Then tidy up if I need to with some of that white or Brigade Grey, because making a circle is quite hard in paint, I won't lie. And then I'm going to start off with the crescent moon. Now I'm just going to do a C to start off with and then try and broaden it out a little bit. But when I was doing this, I made a few mistakes, and that's kind of normal when you're doing freehanding. You kind of thicken one bit up, then thin it out, and then you have to correct, do a little star there. It's not perfect, so I need to get some red and then just make that crescent moon look a little bit more, well, crescent, I guess. But in doing so, the mistake I made here was made it look a little bit more like a C again. So again, it's just part of the process. So again, I just went back with a little bit more white to try and make it look a little bit more like a crescent moon. Again, you don't have to be as finicky as I've been. You can just do a C and a little sort of dot to look like a star. And again, I'll do the same thing on that little satchel pouch as well. Obviously, this is sped up. I'm not that fast at painting. Just thought I'd throw that in there in case you're unsure. And on the other side, there's a really old Ottoman Empire or Turkish design, which looks like I guess like a phoenix kind of design, but I guess it's a crescent moon with like some kind of bar going through it. I really like that as a unit marker. So that's going to be like a unit identification design. And I felt like that helmet could just do a little bit of colour. So thinned down a little bit of that maroon beret and then just went around that little band of metal that you see on the helmet. Just add a little bit of colour. Decided the brown wasn't enough for those eyes, so I went with a bit of black. And again, like on the other two guides, just thinning a little bit of black in places, just to add a bit more definition to some of those deeper recesses. Really helps draw your eye in, helps define those edges a bit more. You can add some scratches if you need to. Again, this isn't a necessary step, it's just something I like to do. Not always, but certainly with like small units for skirmish games, I like to add a little bit of love to them. Just helps bridge the gap a little bit between some colours, like I've said. And then because I got some mid-battle dress and I thought, you know what, I'm going to use that in a minute for some weathering, I might as well pick that bedroll on the back of the satchel in that colour as well. So just get that base coated and then use that same colour and then dry brush around the bottom of the boots and the tunic to look a bit dirty and dusty. I thought that would be a quite nice finish to the model. Even though I'm going to eventually tweak my kit bash for the Iron Sultanate, I really, really like this colour scheme. It's worked really, really well. Again, drawing from the art that obviously is in the book for Trench Crusade and then applying that to a miniature just seems to work really well. That dark olive colour that I used for like all the leather work kind of really helped match it in with that art as well, I think. But keeping to white, red, gold, and then that brown obviously is just used for all the extra bits of furniture like leather details and stuff. Just works really, really well. But I think what really sold it for me was sticking that insignia marking on the arm and then doing the other kind of Ottoman Empire design on the other arm to represent a unit marking or whatever. I just think it added to it, gave it that overall finish, which I think sometimes is what actually helps finish a model off. Like if you're painting at home and you're like looking at your model, you're like, oh, I don't really sure what to do with it. Just sticking some heraldry on a shield or putting like a little symbol here. If you've got like some decals or transfers and you just stick something on an arm or on a helmet, it makes all the difference and it really helps draw it in. It's what I call camouflage. It's one of the things I do on a lot of miniatures. It's just a really, really nice way of moving your focus away from like maybe like a messy paint job here and there, or it's just a bit dirty and grimy. And it's just that one thing or two things maybe that just draw your eye and go, no, it's finished off. It's cool, wicked. As always, a massive thank you to my patrons for your support. You people are amazing. PeachCon is happening in a couple of months' time. By this video coming out, the post should be available on the community for YouTube and my socials as well. So if you are interested in going to PeachCon, do get yourself a ticket. There are free tickets if you're a patron, £6 if you're not a patron, and then some VIP sort of like goodie bag version of a ticket, which is a bit more expensive, but you get some goodies in it. So if you want to come to PeachCon, by all means, get yourself a ticket, come over. Obviously, if you live in another country and it's a bit hard, I do apologise in advance. I'm sorry. Also, what I'm not sorry about is telling you blatantly about this cool new miniature from War Games Atlantic. They're not even sponsoring me to say this, and I don't want to because it's a freaking cool model. It's Sean Bean, everybody. Richard Sharp in his own little plastic box set. But it's not one Richard Sharp. Oh, no, no. I mean, look at the art. Look, you've got Sean Bean as Sharp, but you've also got the book version of Sean Bean, because the book version of Sean Bean, I think, is from London and has dark hair instead of being a blonde northerner from Sheffield. But not only that, you get a 54mm scale as well as your 28mm miniature for your war games. 54mm scale. You know what? In my Silver Bayonet games, maybe Sharp could hulk out and become like, oh no, it's Attack of the 54mm Richard Sharp. That's world ending for a lot of baddies in that universe. Oh, I could introduce that into his story threading Trench Crusade. Maybe he's some way biggifies himself. Anyway, I'm waffling. But yeah, new Sean Bean, new Sharp model. Can't wait. I weed myself when I saw it. Literally weed myself. I know. It's a good job I wear nappies. Right, anyway, bye.